Years ago, I was dating a woman, and we were probably about 6 months into the relationship, and I went over to her house, and, well, this is really uncomfortable to say, but at the time I was so young, like, I was dealing with a new set of emotions I didn't know how to process or handle. So I go over to her place when she invites me over, and we go and lay down on her bed to watch some TV. And I noticed that on her pillowcase, there's all of these like hairs from like a head that were about this long, and they were like darker than mine. So I have like pretty light blonde hair. These were more like darker. These were like almost black hair, okay? And it gave me that internal cringe, and I didn't know what to do or I didn't know what to say, right? This was one of the first times in my life where I had ever felt this internal cringe. But I was so many months in, and I think me and her seemed so good and so happy together. I was a bit confused, and I didn't really know what to do or what to say. So I pick a couple of them up, and I look at them, and I look over at her, and I say, "What is this?" I was like, "Your hair is way longer. These aren't yours." And she made some like excuse or some reasoning how, she got this bedspread, from, it was either her brother or her cousin, and it was his, and she used it, but she just didn't wash them yet, or whatever. And she seems so persuasive, so sincere, she seems so convicted in her tone that she loved me and that she didn't want to lose me, it seemed like. It seemed that way. So at first, I tried to not believe her, right? At first, I looked at her and I said, that's BS, I don't believe this. And I was packing my things to get up and go because I felt really sad, and I just felt terrible. When you're in a relationship and things go south, you get that hollow feeling inside because now you're like all alone, right? You're all alone, and you start thinking about all this stuff. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to have anyone to fall asleep with that night. Going to have nobody to talk to. What's going to happen? I had all those same thoughts and feelings. I'll let you in on a little secret. Doesn't matter how rich or successful a guy is, doesn't matter how good looking, how tall. Every guy feels that if his relationship goes south. Don't think you're alone, and don't think I'm any different than you. Well, I think men are the sacrificial energy. Like, we like to sacrifice for our family. We like to sacrifice for our woman, right? We imagine that, if we had a wife and kids, we'd do anything to protect and to love them. And I think women just aren't wired that way, right? They're more so centered around like self-preservation and maintaining their own peace and their own happiness, and they mainly care about themselves just for survival and instinct purposes. But I felt really terrible when that happened. And as I was trying to leave her place, and I essentially told her I didn't believe her, she started to get a little bit like hysterical. She started to cry, and she like really intensely started to kiss me, and she wanted to all of a sudden sleep with me, like right then and there. She had these intense desires. And this was the first time I had ever experienced something like this. And since I was so young, I was in my early 20s, and I know that some of you guys are going to think, oh, that's old, you should have enough experience, Casey. No, you don't really got experience as a man until you're in your 30s, because all of your 20s is life lessons. Don't let anybody tell you different. I don't care. There's going to be some new cool guru that pops up on social media sometime, probably in the next year or so, who's 21 and claims they got all the answers. And it's like, bro, you don't got any life experience till you're older, and you figure out what not to do, and you figure out what your actual values are, and you figure out what you like and what you don't like, and you figure out how the actual world works. Because listen, anybody can tell you how the world works, but until you experience the emotion associated with the pain for yourself, you will not listen, because you haven't went through it. So it's not going to sink in the same way. It'll go in one ear and out the other. You haven't had the harsh lessons of life. So what happened was I saw her intensity right there in that moment romantically, how intense her emotions were towards me. And then all of a sudden, because I saw that, because in my mind that was now genuine desire, I decided to believe her. And some of you're probably going to say that sounds weak, or some of you are going to say like, that's bad or whatever. Okay, but I decided to believe her, and we were so many months in that I didn't want to lose her, and it seemed like she didn't want to lose me. Well, if you fast forward, okay, months later, I start to have these realizations. And I remembered how, I think it was the first 6 weeks we were dating, I remember that she was on Snapchat, and I saw this dude's name pop over on chat text, and I said, "What's that?" or "Who's that?" And she said, at the time it was her ex, but she claimed she broke up with him, and she claimed that she didn't like him. And she showed me all these messages, and he was sending long paragraphs, and she was sending long paragraphs, and they looked like they were friends, right? So it didn't seem like they still liked each other, right? And at the time, I didn't have enough awareness of female nature because I was so young. So I didn't know what to say, because I believed a lot of the things you probably heard, like don't be insecure, don't show that you care, don't show that those things bother you, or else you're not a real man. If you believed you were better and you had thicker skin, you wouldn't be so insecure, all that. But here's the truth. You can try to run those sentences through your mind all you want. Your internal cringe of your internal emotions in your chest and in your stomach is always going to lead you, and it's always going to tell you what's right or wrong for you. So because of that, since it was only 6 weeks in, and we weren't probably officially a couple yet, I just ignored it and I passed it up. But then I started to put two and two together when I was months later, after the incident happened with the hair that I found on the pillowcase, and I put two and two together, and I knew who the dude was, and I realized that the hair color and the hair length seemed to match him. So I had a feeling that she probably cheated on me. And now our relationship grew, and we were together for a couple years total. But the problem was that after seeing that, and over the course of those years as well, through the grapevine in my hometown, there was a couple dudes that I found out that she slept with in the past before me. Okay, but now at this point, I'm 2 years into this relationship, or probably a couple years into this relationship, and I don't know what to do, because, this is the companion that I built some of my life with. Okay, so the problem is that as a man, right? See, as a man, here's what happens is you get so emotionally invested into something, or you start building a life with someone and you don't want to be alone. So it's very hard to just close off the relationship cold turkey, and dump her and move on. It's very hard to do that, right? Because you're invested into all of the situations and all of the circumstances, and you're invested into her as an individual. It's like she becomes your friend, she becomes the person you're sleeping with, she becomes the person you're watching movies with, she becomes the person you're eating with, and then you sit there and you imagine life at night from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. completely alone every single day. And you imagine eating by yourself, and you imagine watching TV by yourself. And those thoughts prior to a breakup become extremely scary, because nobody wants a sense of isolation. And it really sucks to even think about. So at this point, I didn't know what to do, okay? And she claimed she loved me. I claimed I loved her. We claimed we were a couple. We claimed we liked each other. But now here's where things were really bad. since I didn't have the balls or the backbone to cut off the relationship and to just be done, I didn't have the strength to do that because I was emotionally invested. I stuck it out. And I kept being with her. But the problem is that my internal emotions, I was not able to treat her the right way. Okay, I wasn't able to treat her the right way. So what's happening now after I'm a couple years in is I started to, I wasn't as affectionate, I wasn't as loving, I didn't have romantic desire for her in the bedroom. But it's like, here's this companion that I have. And at that point then, you know, she starts trying extra hard to be nice, and she starts doing this because now, like, she feels like she is losing me. But now this is creating a really, really bad, almost like toxic dynamic, because I feel a certain type of way based off the things I've seen from the past, but now she feels like a certain type of way, like I don't have a heart, I'm heartless, I'm not in tune with my emotions, I don't love her, and now she feels like I'm the bad boy player dude who's, you know, attempting to break her heart because I don't feel the same way. And the truth is, both those circumstances are right in its own way. We ended up breaking up, and it wasn't like a good breakup, you know. It sucked. And I think that, you know, once we broke up, you know, there was still maybe a couple weeks where we saw each other a couple times after, or, you know, she invited me to her place and we still saw each other, you know. And I think maybe she was trying to process everything to, like, get over me. And I was probably trying to do the same, but, you know, I started dating again, and things were fine. But the lesson of this story is, I want to teach you something here. So what I've found, the more I've dated, the more I've coached other guys, is like, men by nature, we are like the sacrificial energy. We want to sacrifice for our loved ones. It sucks we're like that, right? It's hard to put yourself first as a man. It really is. But, you know, that's just how men are. That is the masculine nature. That's why, like, masculine men, when women see it, you know, it can be a bit intimidating, because they know that they're just not wired that way a lot of times. Like, a true masculine man has a sense of devotion and loyalty to his woman, his family. You know, anybody else who's telling you different, like, a true masculine man, you know, has all these options and he's sleeping with all these women. It's like, man, all that is lust. That's degenerate lust is what that is. And what that actually is that's a man in his feminine energy who cannot control his emotional desires. He doesn't have discipline. He doesn't have discipline romantically. What that ends up being with time is a man who's lost. Okay, so listen, the true masculine, right, is the sacrificial energy. Now, as a man, I think that God tests you with different emotions at different times to see how you handle things. And I think that being rational and being able to accept your true nature as that masculine man and having that sacrificial energy, the true test to that is going to be if you are able to walk away. And what I'm trying to tell you is, when you spot things or see things that give you that internal cringe, you have to have the strength to walk away. Because if you don't, here's what's going to happen. Every day that goes by, you're going to have this buildup of emotional intensity that's going to weaken you. So by the end of the relationship, when it does end, she's actually going to view you as a weak beta, because you're going to become more in this feminine state, and you're so invested in the companionship that you're willing to ignore all these things that you've seen. Simultaneously, though, what's going to happen on her end is she's going to think you're very mean, because you're with her, you're taking her time and her energy, you're still with her, right? But now you're not treating her the same way. Since you saw things that you're not willing to verbalize, since you saw things that you're not willing to say because you're too scared it's going to offend, or maybe you're worried that it's going to end the relationship. You're caught between this limbo. Over here it would be single life, and over here it's a relationship. And you don't quite feel the same way anymore to give her the love romantically that she would deserve in a great relationship, partnership, whatever you want to call it. But you don't have the strength to be single. So you're caught between a rock and a hard place. And now she can sense that, and she will eventually look at you and she'll say, because here's what's going to happen. You'll stick in that relationship and another 6 months will go by. So she won't even remember all the things that you saw that gave you that feeling in the first place. But your behavior now is different. And she's going to look at you and go, why don't you love me? Why aren't you good to me? See, you're never good to me. And now she's going to get bitter and resentful at you, and the whole thing's going to dissolve. When you see things, the first sign of red flags, you got to be able to walk away, or you're going to waste a lot of time as a man. I've wasted a lot of time in my life as a man, a lot. I've been with women that were not good for me. I've been with women that I just thought were beautiful. I wasn't who I needed to be at that time. I didn't have a sense of self yet, of understanding who I really was. And on top of that, you know, in today's social media day and age, everybody's taught to work really hard, and you're in this constant state of anxiety because it's like you're worried about money, you're worried about where the world's headed, you're worried about career path, you're worried about what you're going to do in your early 20s and how you're going to find your way. All those emotions I felt. You know, this channel, the lessons that I teach on this channel, they're not pretty. Right, it's years of pain is what built this channel. Years of pain and figuring out how life is. That's where I'll probably wrap up today's video. If you like this, hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. Join us inside the community that I built so I can help you learn, understand, and master the language of women. And we'll see you in the next one.